the earth without the moon. The period when the earth was moonless is probably the most remote recollection of mankind. Democritus, Anaxagoras, taught that there was a time when the earth was without the moon. Aristotle wrote that Arcadia in Greece, before being inhabited by the Hellenes, had a population of Pelasgians, and that these aborigines occupied the land already before there was a moon in the sky above the earth. For this reason, they were called Proselynes. Apollonius of Rhodes mentioned the time when not all orbs were yet in the heavens, before the Danai and Deucalion races came into existence, and only the Arcadians lived, of whom it is said that they dwelt on the mountains and fed on acorns before there was a moon. Plutarch wrote, in Roman Questions, there were Arcadians of Evander's following, the so-called pre-lunar people. Similarly, wrote Ovid, the Arcadians are said to have possessed their land before the birth of Jove, and the folk is older than the moon. Hippolytus refers to a legend that Arcadia brought forth Pelasgians of greater antiquity than the moon. Lucian, in his astrology, says that the Arcadians affirm in their folly that they are older than the moon. Censorinus also alludes to the time in the past when there was no moon in the sky. Some allusions to the time before there was a moon may be found also in the scriptures. In Job 25:5, the grandeur of the Lord who makes peace in the heights is praised, and the time is mentioned before there was a moon. And it did not shine. Also in Psalm 72:5 it is said, Thou wasn't feared since the time of the sun and before the time of the moon, a generation of generations. A generation of generations means a very long time. Of course, it is of no use to counter this psalm with the myth of the first chapter of Genesis, a tale brought down from exotic and later sources. The memory of a world without a moon lives in oral tradition among the Indians. The Indians of Bogota, highlands, in the eastern Cordilleras of Colombia relate some of their tribal reminiscences to the time before there was a moon. In the earliest times, when the moon was not yet in the heavens, say the tribesmen of the Chibchas, there are currently 3 theories of the origin of the moon. 1. The moon originated at the same time as the earth, being formed substantially from the same material, aggregated and solidifying. 2. Was formed not in the vicinity of the earth, but in a different part of the solar system, and was later captured by the earth. 3. The moon was originally a portion of the terrestrial crust, and was torn out, leaving behind the bed of the Pacific. All 3 theories claim the presence of the moon on an orbit around the earth for billions of years. Mythology may supply each of these views with some support. Genesis 1, for the first view. The birth of Aphrodite from the sea, for the third view. Aphrodite's origin in the disruption of Uranus, and also the violence of sin, the Babylonian moon, seems to support the second view. Since mankind on both sides of the Atlantic preserved the memory of a time when the earth was without a moon, the first hypothesis, namely of the moon originating simultaneously with the earth and in its vicinity, is to be excluded, leaving the other 2 hypotheses to compete between themselves. We have seen that the traditions of diverse peoples offer corroborative testimony to the effect that in a very early age, but still in the memory of mankind, no moon accompanied the earth. Since human beings already peopled the earth, it is improbable that the moon sprang from it. There must have existed a solid lithosphere, not a liquid earth. Thus, while I do not claim to know the origin of the moon, I find it more probable that the moon was captured by the earth. Such an event would have occurred as a catastrophe. If the moon's formation took place away from the earth, its composition may be quite different. There is no evidence to suggest whether the moon was a planet, a satellite of another planet, or a comet at the time of its capture by the Earth. Whatever atmosphere it may have had was pulled away by the Earth, by other contacting bodies, or dissipated in some other way. Since the time the moon began to accompany the Earth, it underwent the influence of contacts with comets and planets that passed near the Earth in subsequent ages. The mass of the moon being less than that of the Earth, the moon must have suffered greater disturbances in cosmic contacts. During these contacts, the moon was not carried away. This is due to the fact that no body more powerful than the Earth came sufficiently close to the moon to take it away from the Earth for good. But in the contacts that took place, the moon was removed repeatedly from one orbit to another. The variations in the position of the moon can be read in the variations in the length of the month. The length of the month repeatedly changed in subsequent catastrophic events. And for this, there exists a large amount of supporting evidence. In these later occurrences, the moon played a passive role, and Zeus in the Iliad advised it, Aphrodite, to stay out of the battle in which Athena and Ares, Venus and Mars, that I pronounced wrong for the whole video, were the main contestants. Okay, so what I'm thinking is when Earth was a satellite of Saturn, of course, the moon probably wasn't, there was a time when it wasn't with the Earth, maybe not even with the planets. I like the theory about the moon coming from Uranus, and it sounds like there might have been a time when the moon was very close to the Earth and still molten, which if that was the case, for a while it could have acted as the big masculine body that was observed in the last episode. So that's a possibility, and the Earth captured the moon, like it said, and then it slowly receded, or something maybe pulled it. There's so many things that could have happened, but delving down into it and trying to figure it out is fascinating. All right, references.
Hippolytus, Refutatio Omnium Heresium VE. Aristotle FR, 591 ed. V. Rose, Geoidna, Tübingen, 1886. Cf. Pauli's Real Encyclopädie der klassischen Altertumswissenschaft. Article Mond H. Rocher, Lexicon D. Griech, und Römisch, Mythology. Article Proselynes, Argonautica IV.264.
Plutarch, Moralia, translated by F.C. Babbitt, section 76.
Fasti, translated by Sir J. Fraser, 290. Refutatio Omnium Heresium VE.
Lucian Astrology, translated by A.M. Harmon, 1936.
Liber de Die Natali 19, also Scholium on Aristophanes' Clouds, line 398. Ed von Humboldt, VUEs des. Cordilleras 1816, English translation, Researches Concerning the Institutions and Monuments of the Ancient Inhabitants of America 1814, Volume 1, p. 87, cf. H. Fisher in Modern World 1930.
In addition to the sources cited above, the Nihongi Chronicles of Japan transactions proceeding on the Japanese society, which recount how heaven and earth produced the moon god. The Kalevala of the Fens recalls a time when the moon was placed in orbit.
Cf. The effects of such an event on the Earth's rotation calculated by H. Gerstenkorn in Zeitschrift für Astrophysik 36, 1955, p. 245, cf. Iodine in Mantles of the Earth and the Terrestrial Planets. S.K. Run Cornell, New York, 1967. Also Iodine in Icarus 990, cf. H. Alphen and G. Arrhenius.
Two alternatives for the history of the moon. Science 165, 1969. S.F. Singer and L.W. Banderman. Where was the moon formed? Science 1970. The moon was formed independently of the Earth and later captured, presumably by a three-body interaction, and these events were followed by the dissipation of the excess energy through tidal friction in a close encounter. More recently, a study of lunar paleotides has shown that the moon could not have been formed in orbit around the Earth. A.J. Anderson, Lunar Paleotides and the Origin of the Earth-Moon System. The Moon and the Planets, 1978. Because of a certain degree of instability in the Sun-Earth-Moon system, the planetary origin and capture of the Moon by the Earth becomes a strong dynamic possibility. R. Mackenzie and Sebehe. Forget it. Stability of the Sun-Earth-Moon system. The Astronomical Journal, 1977.
Cf. U. B. Cherniak on recent lunar atmosphere. Nature 273, the 15th of June 1978, pp.
497. The author found strong theoretical evidence of a considerable atmosphere on the moon during the greater part of its history. Yeah, I remember reading about that before. I think it's trying to grow one now. Wow, that was a longer reference than the article. I always found it odd that the Earth had this planet of beautiful color with an atmosphere and water, and the moon, which is in the sun's comfort zone too, so-called, is barren and dead. I never quite got that. If we were both in the same place at the same time, we should look similar. I like going through the references. Astronomical knowledge before the deluge. A civilization was destroyed, the real value of which is incalculable. Hebrew tradition estimates that the population of the antediluvian world amounted to millions. Adam is said to have invented 70 languages. Cain, his son, built cities and monuments and ruled over kings. They were representatives of generations. According to Hebrew legends, the deluge and its time had already been predicted by Enoch, and even more ancient generations were said to have erected tablets, calendric and astronomical calculations predicting the catastrophe. They must have seen it coming. This might have been the knowledge of months, of years, and of periods of comets that the remote generations had acquired. It was in the celestial harmony and disharmony that the secrets of the upheavals were conceived to lie. The science about the times in which calamity could return and fall on our earth was cultivated among populations that had a vivid remembrance of days of misfortune or of lucky escape. It is told about the children of Seth, the son of Adam, that they were the inventors of that peculiar sort of wisdom which is concerned with the heavenly bodies and their order, and that their inventions might not be lost before they were sufficiently known. They made 2 pillars upon Adam's prediction that the world was to be destroyed, at one time by the force of fire, and at another time by the violence and quantity of water. The one was of brick, the other of stone, and they inscribed their discoveries on for all the 243 years during which the influence of Enoch prevailed. In the story of Enoch's ascension, it is said that he predicted the disaster. Enoch was carried into the heavens in a fiery chariot drawn by fiery chargers. Now that is pretty wild. The day thereafter, the kings who had turned back in good time sent messengers to inquire into the fate of the men who had refused to separate themselves from Enoch, for they had noted the number of them. They found snow and great hailstones upon the spot whence Enoch had risen. And when they searched beneath, they discovered the bodies of all who had remained behind with Enoch. He alone was not among them. He was high in heaven. What the Aggadah means to tell is that a human being, and one gifted with the greatest wisdom concerning the heavenly bodies and their order, was brought away in a fiery storm which killed many, brought snow and meteorites, and which had been predicted by the one who disappeared. Some exact knowledge of the revolution of the bodies in the sky is ascribed here to the antediluvian generations. It is said that the real period of grace endured not for 7 days, but for 120 years. During this time, the flood was over mankind as a threat. Sanhedrin 108b. Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews 2:8, borrowed by Yasher Bereshit.
Genesis 5:24.
Is live in Hernando, Mississippi, where there's been spottings of a cougar and away from where a local man rolled his cell phone video on what some say is a cougar. Right back with a lot of reports.
Look at this picture here of the face on Mars. The left side. What does that look like to you? Kind of looks like a lizard to me. You see the lizard eye there? The slit? That's digital. And then they switch it over to analog and you get this. Comes right after it. And it looks like a clown. Like an evil killer clown. Remember that movie? It's kind of weird.